Today I'm making my top summer celebration meal of an indoor clam bake. That's right, it's a clam bake that you make indoors because I live in the burbs, not by the beach. And I always serve it with a cornbread and a quick salad made of apples and fennel. And believe it or not, the cornbread takes longer to cook than the clam bake. So we're gonna start with that first. Now, I grew up in upstate New York, in Rochester, New York, and so I didn't have Southern cornbread, you know, that's made in the cast iron. You start with the cornmeal mush. There's no flour, there's no sugar. That's a very distinctive type of Southern cornbread. That's not what I grew up with. I grew up with sweet and cakey, and so that's what I'm gonna make today. Now, it starts with a little bit of buttermilk. That's just a cup of buttermilk. And I love the method for this cornbread because it's so simple. You whisk the wet together, you whisk the dry together, and you combine them, throw it in the oven. So this is the wet ingredients. Into the buttermilk goes 2 eggs. All right, now the honey. Now the honey is the sweetener in the sweet cornbread, and we're gonna use a whopping 2/3 of a cup of honey. And believe it or not, I mean, it's sweet cornbread, but it's not achingly sweet, because honey just isn't as sweet as sugar. So to measure the honey, I'm using this fantastic adjustable measuring cup, which just makes measuring sticky things like honey really easy. All right, so that's 2/3 of a cup. Now, this is why I love this thing. Into the bowl it goes. No mess, no fuss. I know, it's the little things, right? Last but not least, some butter. And here I have 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter that's been melted and cooled in my little butter melting pot. Add that to all the wet ingredients. Now just whisk it together. Now you really want to whisk this well because you want to dissolve all that honey and it'll stick to the bottom of the bowl. So take your time here, really make sure that honey is dissolved into the liquid. And you notice I'm using an oversized mixing bowl. That's by design because I usually make a good mess. But when you're whisking something like this, it's nice to have a little extra room. Oh, that honey smells good. All right, so set the wet ingredients aside. Now time to work on the dry ingredients. And as always, when baking, I like to weigh everything. It's just faster and easier. And as I mentioned, this is a northern style sweet cornbread, which means it's a combination of flour and cornmeal. So it's about half and half, a little bit extra flour compared to cornmeal. It's 1 1/4 cups of flour to 1 cup of cornmeal. But in weights, that's 6 1/4 ounces, nailed it, and 5 ounces of cornmeal. Now you can really use any brand of cornmeal you like. I like the more coarsely ground cornmeal because I like those gritty, chewy bits in the finished bread. But if you use a finer grind, it still works just as well. There we go, 5 ounces. Now for some leavener, because this is essentially a quick bread. So we're gonna use a combination of baking powder and baking soda. So starting with the baking powder, it's a teaspoon of baking powder, teaspoon of table salt, and last but not least, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And that's it. So easy. So you want to whisk the dry ingredients together. And that's pretty good. Now wet into dry. Get all of that out of there. Now you just stir them together till there are no lumps. A few lumps are okay. I'm never worried about over stirring this because again, it's a combination of flour and cornmeal, so you're never gonna build up too much gluten. And you can see right away that buttermilk and those leaveners are starting to create bubbles. That's a good sign. That looks pretty good. Now I'm gonna bake this in a metal 8-inch pan that I've greased already with vegetable oil spray. And I like using metal pans here. One, because I like the straight sides, whereas most glass pans have curved sides. But also the metal pan makes the outside really nice and crisp. And I like those crisp edges. If you do use a glass pan, however, the baking time will be significantly longer by 5 or 10 minutes. There we go. Now this takes about half an hour in the oven, 375 degrees on the middle rack.
Love our in-depth reviews? Get the latest from our reviews team delivered straight to your inbox. Our well-equipped cook newsletter provides top product picks, no-nonsense buying guides, and must-try recipes. No extra fluff, just the smartest ways to shop, save, and cook. Sign up for free now at americastestkitchen.com/newsletter.
All right, so while that's in the oven, I'm gonna make the quick salad with fennel and apples. And I make this salad all summer long. And I make it a variety of different ways. Sometimes, like today, I make it with a little mayonnaise and cider vinegar. Sometimes I use olive oil and lemon juice, but either way, this combination of sweet apples and fennel is terrific. And it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So scale it up, scale it down, 1 apple to 1 head of fennel. And we're gonna start with the fennel. I'm gonna cut off these tops here, and these fronds are beautiful and they taste wonderful. And I'm gonna put them in this bowl over here, and I'm gonna use some of them in the final salad as a garnish. All right, now to slice the fennel for a salad, what you wanna do is cut each head in half, and then you can see there's this core right in the bottom here. It's a triangle-shaped core, pyramid-shaped core. You just wanna angle the knife and cut it out. There we go. And now to slice it for a salad, we're just gonna slice it crosswise as thin as you can. If you have a mandolin, this is a great time to pull it out, but I like cutting everything by hand. So I'm just gonna use my nice sharp knife. And get right down to that core. All right, here's the last one. So as always, when you're chopping, there's a couple ways to hold a knife. You should choose whatever is most comfortable to you. I like grasping it back on the handle. It's just how I learned, and it's how I hold a knife now. But many people I know like to choke up and like to pinch the blade. I think a lot of people call this a pinch grip for obvious reasons. So your forefinger on one side, your thumb on the other, and you're pinching the blade. And for a lot of people, that just gives you a little more maneuverability and a little more agility. Some people I know just extend their pointer finger all the way down the spine or the back of the knife, and they like it that because it feels like they get more precision and I think a little more heft. So play around with your knife grip, try a couple different options and see what works best for you, because there's no right or wrong way. All right, so that is our thinly sliced fennel. So we're gonna set this fennel aside while we work on the apples. 2 apples. I like using Granny Smith's or a sweet. This is the Gala apple. Something with a good bright flavor is what you want here. And we're gonna cut it into matchsticks. And to do that, you wanna cut down on the side of each apple, right around the core, so that when you're done coring the apple, you just get a nice thick core. Sometimes I nibble on those as a kitchen snack. And then to make matchsticks, simply working with the flat side of the apple, slice down to make thin slices, then just lay the slices out and make matchsticks. And a rustic cut is really nice here. There's no reason to be precise. This is supposed to be an easy, casual summer salad. So this is not a knife skills test. Sometimes you can stack them like that and cut a whole bunch at one time. Last but not least, a little bit of tarragon. You think about the flavor of tarragon, pairs really nicely with the anise licorice flavor of the fennel, and then combine that with the sweetness of the apple, and you have just a winning combination. And it tastes good with the seafood coming up in the clambake. All right, so you want, a good amount of tarragon, a couple teaspoons. I like tarragon, so I usually add a bit extra. All right. So we're gonna coarsely chop this fresh tarragon. Ah, it's a good smell. All right, and that's it for the chopping for the salad. Now into the bowl, I'm gonna make the dressing, then add everything into the bowl. Starting with mayonnaise. It's about a 1/2 cup of mayonnaise. That's about it. We're gonna add some cider vinegar, which has a really bright flavor. Just a 1/4 cup of cider vinegar. All right. Some cider vinegar, about a tablespoon of sugar, some salt and some pepper. Then we're just going to whisk this together. So as you can see, it's not a lot of dressing, just a little bit, enough to coat it. Make it feel like a salad without weighing it down. Into the bowl goes everything. I love this salad. I'm kind of known for this salad. If I'm ever invited to a picnic at someone's house or a backyard barbecue, this is what I bring. All right, a little test for seasoning. So easy, so good. A little salt, a little pepper. As I mentioned, the fennel fronds on top of the fennel have a lovely flavor. And so you might as well add these in. Just really further that fennel flavor a little bit. And they also are a really pretty garnish. Almost look like dill in a way. All right, so I'm gonna chop them up. And now into a pretty bowl. I'm gonna put all this salad. Again, huge mixing bowl for a small amount of salad. Just reduces the mess you make in the kitchen. All right. And then sprinkle with some fennel fronds. Ah, beautiful. Simple, summery. All right, we're just gonna set this aside while we wait for the cornbread and get started on the clambake. That cornbread has been in the oven for 30 minutes. Time to take a look. Oh, smells good, doesn't it, Ziggy? Now, to test cornbread for doneness, there's a couple ways to do it. First, I like to use a skewer and poke it in the center, spin it a little bit, see if there's any raw batter. So no raw batter, that's a good sign that it's baked through. Also, the browning is a good indicator that it's evenly baked. You can see it as a nice golden brown. Now, the last test is when you take your fingers and you press on the outside, because you know it bakes from the outside in, and you can see how it's baked there, and you can see how bouncy it is, and then slowly move your finger to the center, and you look for that resistance that you feel on the outside in the center. So it's as baked as it is on the outside, it's baked in the center. And this feels perfect. All right, so the cornbread's a little on the delicate side. We're not gonna take it out of the pan yet. Gonna give it 5 or 10 minutes to cool down and set up in the pan before we turn it out. So I'll set this aside. Now it's time for the main event. We're gonna build the indoor clambake. And as I mentioned, this is one of my favorite summer meals. We make this during all summer celebrations. 4th of July, my birthday is in the summer, so is Ian's birthday. And you know, I developed this recipe 20 years ago maybe when I first met Ian. And I was really proud of it because I didn't grow up with clambakes. I grew up in upstate New York. We didn't do clambakes up there. And so when I figured out that you could actually make a clambake in your own suburban kitchen, I was kind of shocked how good it tasted. And you know, it brings the house down every time. It's also kind of a magic trick because and I always like to unveil it in front of a crowd because it's just magical what comes out of this pot. Now you want to use a big pot. That's at least 12 quarts. This one has nice straight sides and is tall, and I love it because it works perfectly. You can see in the bottom, see that? See those circles? It can pit your pot a bit, especially if you use a stainless pot. I don't mind the pitting. It doesn't affect the performance of the pot at all, and that's just because it's well loved, and this is my clambake pot. All right, so first up in the clambake is the sausage, and this is kielbasa, and we're gonna cut it into 1/2-inch rounds. All right, step one is we're gonna layer the kielbasa into the bottom of the pot. So a single layer, all cut side down. So I'm gonna take some time here really to arrange it all so it's all flat and in a single layer. And this is pretty crucial because step one of making a clambake is we're gonna put this pot over high heat. And so when that heat hits the bottom of the pot, you have this fatty kielbasa here that will start to brown and render. And it is a delicious flavor, but it also prevents things from burning on the bottom of the pot. So it's kind of like a flavorful insulator. So kielbasa goes on the bottom of the pot, looks about like that. All right. So next up, clams and mussels. Now you can use all clams, all mussels. I like using a combination of the two because I think they look pretty. I like the variations in flavor. You want about 4 pounds altogether. So here I have 2 pounds of each into the pot right on top of the kielbasa. Now when I first developed this recipe, I got a little fussy and I used to put them in a cheesecloth sack because it was easy to take them out of the pot. Over the years, I've totally gotten rid of the cheesecloth sack and I just scoop it out with a slotted spoon along with everything else. All right, so nice flat layer. This pot gets full, so you really want to pack it in there. There you go. Nice layer of clams and mussels. Next up, potatoes. want about a pound, pound and a half of red potatoes, new potatoes. And if you can find a uniform size, the little ones that are an inch or smaller, you don't have to prep them at all. You can just leave them whole. But these, you can see, are a variety of sizes. So I'm going to cut them so they all the same size so that they cook at the same rate, making them all about an inch. Hi, Hazel. Someone wants the kielbasa already. You'll get some. You'll get some. Oh, the other one not far behind. Hi, Ziggy. You guys are good dogs. Food's raw. Gotta wait till dinner time. My guard dogs. They're gonna stand guard on the pot to make sure nothing happens to it while it cooks. All right, here's our last potato. Into the pot the potatoes go, right on top of the clams and mussels. All right, next layer, second to last layer is corn. This is just corn on the cob, and I actually bought it this way. They trimmed it so it fits perfectly in the pot, and they left just a few of the husks on one side, and I'm gonna put it in the pot husk side up. That way, when the lobsters go on top, any of the albumin that comes out of the lobsters hits the husk and doesn't get into the corn. Just makes it look tidier. All right, in goes the corn. Last but not least, the lobsters. All right, here I have 2 lobsters. Told you it was a tight pot. Now, when you buy lobsters, they're live, obviously, and these are no longer live. So what I like to do is I like to kill the lobsters before I get in the pot. I just think it feels more respectful to the animal. And I also put them in the freezer before I kill them, just stuns them a bit. And then to kill them, you just put a knife through the head, and that's all it takes. So there's that last lobster. It is a full pot, so you definitely don't want to use a pot that's too small. So let me describe to you what's going to happen when we put this pot with the lid on over high heat for 20 minutes, medium-high heat if you have a powerful stove. So as the heat comes up to that first layer, hits the kielbasa sears, releases its fat and its juices, then the heat goes up a bit further, hits the clams and the mussels. They steam, they open, all their juice comes out, hits the bottom of the hot, dry pot, creates an amazing amount of steam that steams the potatoes and the corn and reaches the lobsters. By the time the heat hits the lobsters and they start to cook, they also release juice, which helps keeping that steamy environment so everything cooks through. Also makes everything taste a little like lobster, which is kind of the hallmark of a great clam bake. All right, so, I forgot to take the rubber bands off the claws. Now that they're dead, you don't have to worry about it. Ian hates it when I forget to take the rubber bands off. He likes to think that everything tastes like rubber. I think he's making it up. But it is nice not to cook the rubber bands. All right, on goes the lid. I know you're worried if it's gonna fit, right? Just barely. Like I said, this is my clam bake pot, so I know it'll fit. But you see how it has this domed lid, gives me that little bit of extra insurance. All right, on to the heat it goes. 20 minutes, we'll start the timer. So I've never had a clam bake take any longer than 20 minutes, but we are going to test it for doneness by looking at the potatoes after that 20-minute mark. If the potatoes are done, the whole clam bake's done. All right, so the clam bake is on the stove, the salad's done, and this has cooled in its pan for 5-10 minutes. Now I'm just going to turn it out of its pan and let it cool completely. Oh, there we go. We're gonna let it cool completely while that clam bake is cooking. I like it warm, but I don't like it hot. If you serve it too warm, it tastes a little mushy. And you can see that dark golden crust on the outside. That is my favorite part. I'm a cornbread kind of person because I love that dark flavor. It's almost like caramelized honey flavor. All right, cornbread's cooling, the salad's made, the clam bake is on, and we're on the rails.
At Cooks Illustrated, we're food nerds. That's why every recipe we develop involves research, cooking science, and rigorous testing by our team of expert test cooks. Only the highest rated recipes earn a place in our award-winning magazine. Every issue features our latest recipes and discoveries, cooking tips, and equipment and ingredient reviews. Our step-by-step photos and hand-drawn illustrations show you exactly how to succeed. So, are you ready to become the best cook you know? Subscribe to Cooks Illustrated magazine at cooksillustrated.com today.
So that clam bake has just a few more minutes on it. By the timer, it looks like about 4 minutes. So it's time to start getting everything assembled for the meal. All right, so here we have the cornbread, which is time to cut. I like to cut this into relatively small-ish pieces. You can always go back for seconds if you want a big old piece. Some are bigger than others, aren't they? It's rustic. All right, I'm gonna put the cornbread on a nice platter. Somebody here's cornbread. All right. It's been about 20 minutes. Time to check the Clambake. Oh, this is the best part. That is the smell of summer celebrations right there. Woo. All right, so the trick to telling if everything's done, as I mentioned before, is in the potatoes. So what you can do is you can take the tip of a paring knife or a skewer like this, and you can find some potatoes right on the edge of the pot. You can find them right underneath the corn. You just want to see if they're tender. So far, so good. We're good. All right, so everything's done. Time to platter up this feast. Now, take your time plattering this. First of all, it's hot, as you know. Second of all, it is fun. Try to do this in front of a crowd if you can, because this pot is a little like Mary Poppins bags. You'll just shock everybody with what's coming out. All right, so I'm gonna put the lobsters aside for now, and I'm just using the lid of the pot to catch any drips. Oh. My daughter always names the lobsters. Their names are always George and Larry, so George and Larry can stay there. Now you're gonna need a big old platter for this. And what I like to think about doing is dropping this platter right on the middle of the table, and everyone can kind of grab what they're wanting at the moment. So there's the corn, making sure everyone has access to the corn. And that little bit of white albumin that came out of the lobsters that's on the corn, that's okay. I actually love the flavor of that. All right, now using a spoon, a slotted spoon, I just like to go in there and take everything. So you got some potatoes, you can go down and get some clams and some kielbasa, and just dump it onto the platter. Cleanup crew's already here in case I happen to drop anything on the floor. Oh, you can smell the kielbasa. Oh, and the clams. I'm going to show you here a piece of the kielbasa to show you, oh, there's a decent piece. You can see it gets a little bit of sear on it. That's that little bit of time while the pot is still dry, gets to sear the sausage a little bit before all the juice comes out of the clams and mussels. I've used a lot of different kinds of sausage in this over the years, and I always come back to kielbasa because it's fatty enough, can withstand that 20-minute cooking time without getting dry. Now the neat thing is that what's left in the bottom of this pot is a really flavorful liquid. Think about the clams and the mussels and the lobster and all the juice that they release as they cook. And I like serving that alongside everything so people can dip it into the juice if they want to. So here I have a little bowl, a little strainer. Just gonna strain that jus. It's amazing how much liquid comes out in the bottom of the pot when you think about how when we started it was just a dry pot. No need to add any liquid to this. All right. Woo. There we go. Let's not forget the melted butter, shall we? Along with the jus, I like to add a big bowl of melted butter. Oh yeah. Dipping the potatoes in the butter is my favorite part. All right. Last but not least, the lobsters. Oh, right on top. And that is how you assemble a beautiful platter of indoor clam bake, perfect for everyone who lives in the suburbs like me. This is my favorite summer feast. It's only missing one thing. And that is a bucket of ponies. Now, if you don't know what a bucket of ponies is, ponies are a little beer. I think they're about 7 ounces. You serve them in a big bucket of ice because they stay ice cold. All right, so a bucket of ponies. Don't mind if I do. Look at all this gorgeous food. I mean, it comes together in a snap. Really, this meal takes less than an hour, and it is so impressive. Might as well make a little plate to taste it. All right, corner piece of cornbread for me. A little salad. A mussel, a clam. Oh, potatoes, yes please. Oh, some of that kielbasa. Kielbasa, I like to dunk. Sometimes I do individual serving bowls of the jus just so everyone can really dip as they like. A little butter. Oh. A little bit of salad. The fresh flavor of the salad, the anise with the tarragon plays so nicely with all the fresh seafood flavors. It's like a crisp palate cleanser. A little bit of cornbread. Oh, that cornbread has that fragrance finish thanks to the honey and some cold beer. Oh, it doesn't get any better than this in the summer. See you next time. If you're ready to take your cooking to the next level, head over to americastestkitchen.com and get a free trial of our ATK Essential membership. While you're there, you can sign up for our free email newsletters and download our app. So, what are you waiting for?